Israel continued to disobey God. They had fallen into idols, worshipped and neglected God's commandment to worship Him and Him alone. For this, God's punishment was heavy on His will, and He gave them over into the hands of the Midianites. For 7 years, Israel suffered terrible hardship under the oppression of the Midianites, who, along with the Amalekites and the people from the east, plundered Israel's livestock and produced leaving none for Israel's own use. The Israelites complained and cried out to God in great distress. God heard their cries and sent them a prophet to explain why this hardship was upon them. It was their sin and disobedience that caused it. During that time, there is a young man named Gideon. He was beating out wheat in a winepress when the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said,
"The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor."
Gideon wasn't feeling very brave or very happy.
If the Lord is with us, then why are we suffering so much? And why are we being oppressed by the Midianites?
The Lord then looked at Gideon and said,
"Go and deliver Israel from the hands of the Midianites."
Gideon was in shock, and how would he, a young man from the weakest clan of the tribe of Manasseh, be able to deliver Israel from the Midianites?
How can I save Israel, my Lord? My tribe is the weakest, and I am the youngest in my family.
The Lord answered by assuring Gideon that God would be with him. God gave him strength to fight the Midianites, and He would give them victory.
"I will surely be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites as one man."
Gideon was in disbelief. If this indeed was true, he needed to make sure that God was going to pull through. He then proceeded to ask the angel of the Lord for a sign.
If you will protect me and help me, and give me a sign, and I will believe in you.
So Gideon went in to prepare a food offering to God. When he came out, the angel of the Lord told him to put the food on a rock, and proceeded to touch the food with her staff. When that happened, fire sprung up and consumed the entire food offering. At that moment, the angel of the Lord vanished from Gideon's sight. God just showed Gideon a mighty sign that might God continue to work in Gideon's heart, preparing him for a big task ahead. He told Gideon to break down the statue of Baal his father built and cut down the Asherah next to it. These false gods were what got Israel in trouble. Israel was still foolish enough to believe that a wooden statue could actually help them instead of relying on the one true God. Gideon was still scared and needed more courage and asked God for another sign. So Gideon said to God,
If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, I will place a fleece wool outside on the ground, and if it is wet with dew in the morning and all around, and if the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand as you have said.
Early the next morning, Gideon checked the fleece and wrung out a bowl of water while the rest of the ground was dry. God listened to Gideon's request and gave him a sign, but Gideon was still scared and needed more reassurance. Gideon then asked for a reversal of the first sign.
Please do not be angry with me, but give me one more test with the fleece of the wall. At this time, make the fleece dry and the ground around it wet by the morning.
And so it happened. The ground was wet and the fleece was dry. This time, Gideon knew that God was really going to use him to save Israel from the Midianites. The next morning, Gideon and the 32,000 of men assembled, together waiting on instructions from the Lord. The Lord knew that Gideon had to understand and see firsthand God's miraculous deliverance and victory. God spoke to Gideon and said,
Announce to the Israelites, anyone who is fearful and afraid may leave and return to your families.
Those who are scared, go home immediately.
That day, 22,000 warriors left and 10,000 remained. This was too small a number to battle the Midianites. Gideon was confused but continued to trust God.
There are still too many men. Go down to the water and watch how the men drink.
Then Gideon took the men to a stream of water.
Separate the ones who lap like a dog from those that kneel down and scooped up the water with their hands. All men who drank from the stream of water, bent down like dogs, should go home as well. Those who scooped up the water in their hands could stay.
Out of the 10,000 remaining, only 300 men remained.
I will save you.
There they went, thousands of capable warriors left Gideon's army, and only 300 remained. God really wanted to show Gideon that victory comes from the mighty power of God, not laid the strength of men. That night, Gideon and his tiny little army looked down at the huge Midianite camp. Gideon trusted God, but the Midianites were so many. God told Gideon,
Go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. But if you're afraid to attack them, then take a servant down to their camp, hear what they are saying, and this will give you courage to attack them.
God told Gideon to go down to Midianites' camp and spy on them. Gideon and his servants snuck close to the camp of the Midianites, just in time to hear one of their warriors telling his friend,
I had a dream last night that a round loaf of bread came tumbling into our camp and struck a tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed.
This frightened his friend, and he replied, It means nothing.
Other than the sword of getting the Israelites, God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into the hands of Gideon.
When Gideon heard what the two men were saying, he left and worshipped and thanked God for giving him the confidence to attack the Midianites. The Lord once again strengthened his heart, and Gideon was finally ready for battle. When Gideon returned to the camp of Israel, he said,
Get up! The Lord has given the Midianites unto your hand.
Gideon separated the 300 men into 3 groups of 100. He gave each warrior 1 trumpet, 1 torch, and a jar to hide their torch. In the dark of the night, they would stand on the mountains around the Midianite army.
Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of camp, do exactly as I do. And I and all who are with me blow our trumpets. You will do the same and shout, For the Lord and for Gideon! And smash the jars on the ground while you hold your trumpets in your right hand and your torches on your left hand.
All 3 groups surrounded the camp, and all waited for the sound of the trumpets. Suddenly, Gideon and his group of 100 blew their trumpets and smashed their jars on the ground. The other 200 did the same, creating a terrifying sound in the middle of the night. The Midianite soldiers jumped up crying out as they ran into the darkness of the night. They were so frightened that they began fighting each other with their swords, killing each other within the camp. It was a sight to behold. The confusion spread so rapidly that the Midianites ran away. Gideon and his 300 men army pursued them, and it was not long before they defeated the mighty Midianites. That day, God delivered the Midianites into the hands of Gideon. God's mighty power once again proved that He is the one true God, and that He wanted to bless and protect His people. During Gideon's lifetime, the land enjoyed peace from their enemies, and the Israelites turned their hearts back to God. God wanted the Israelites to put their trust in Him and serve him alone.